Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast. My name is Anthony Oliver, and today we're going to ask how designing better infrastructure can help to really grow the UK economy. Now, we hear constantly about the vital role that investment in infrastructure projects must play in driving economic growth across the nation and across the regions of the UK, be that investment in transport, in energy systems, in water treatment and supply, and in communications. But what can actually be done by infrastructure professionals to accelerate this investment? How do we navigate the policy shifts? How do we overcome the hold-ups in planning and the delays in delivery? And of course, the inevitable cost overruns once these things are designed. And once constructed, how do we avoid failing to create the kind of social, economic and environmental outcomes that were promised at the outset? Well, it's a tough conundrum, but one that an army of infrastructure design and planning professionals stand ready to solve. It's to design and deliver infrastructure capable of truly kickstarting and sustaining the economy and of fundamentally making lives better. So what's stopping them? Well, to discuss this issue, my guest today is Charlie Hodgson, Executive Managing Director of Transport and Infrastructure at WSP, one of the largest consultancies in the UK. And while Charlie is responsible for the strategic direction and delivery of WSP's infrastructure and engineering teams, he started his career as an economist. So perhaps more than most, really understands the links between investment and outcomes, and of course, what can be done to strengthen them. So, Charlie, welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast.
Anthony, look, thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Great. Well, Charlie, this link between infrastructure investment and economic growth, to what extent do you see investment as a real driver for the economy?
It's a good question. And for me, infrastructure investment is critical. It's central to our success of the UK economy, and in fact, all economies. That's like moving people around, moving goods around, using our transport networks, but also power, water, food distribution, and the energy grid and the telecommunications network as well, all of which are in the wider kind of context of infrastructure and are the vital underpinning enabler that functions, that drives our functioning society. So look, apart from there's a critical role to keep the country running, but it also plays a really important role in terms of the equitable distribution of that growth. We've had the kind of levelling up agenda, but we need to make sure we get the right infrastructure in the right places so that we can try and create a more fair and equal society. It's also important for a whole range of other strategic government objectives, particularly around the move towards net zero, which is forecast to produce over 1 million jobs in the next 20 years. But just as importantly, the resilience we can put into our infrastructure to deal with the changing weather conditions we've got through climate change. So pretty fundamental.
Well, from your position at WSP, and I suppose I mentioned with your economist hat on, what do you think can actually be done by infrastructure professionals to accelerate and to smooth the flow of this investment?
We all need to step back and take a look at the bigger picture. It's very easy to jump into the specifics of the project you're dealing with today, the client you're trying to sell a job to, or that you're trying to help deliver a piece of work with. And unfortunately, recently, some of the big decision makers, whether that's private sector investors, international investors as well, or government stakeholders, have sort of seen the credibility of our ability to deliver infrastructure take a bit of a hit. Mm-hmm. I think what we can do about that in terms of the industry is make sure we really streamline the delivery of our infrastructure schemes. We take that holistic approach, starting with option selection, scheme development, consenting, through to the detailed design, construction, procurement, delivery, commissioning, operations, and make sure that we shorten those time horizons and we cut out risk wherever we can through the delivery of those projects. We might do that through utilising digital technology, through changing the way in which we interact as teams, through changing the commercial models we use, all of which I think we need to do to build that confidence in the people who make the big decisions that flow the money into the investments,
right, yeah.
To make sure they feel safe to take more schemes forward.
Well, I mentioned quite a few challenges, facing the infrastructure sector in my intro. I mean, it's clear that the industry does need to transform itself to drive up productivity, to deliver better, more predictable outcomes, and of course reduce the impact on the environment. I mean, what are you actually doing at WSP to spearhead this transformation? How are you changing what you do for your clients?
Yeah, so we do a huge amount on the ground on projects that we're working on now. Further to that, we also invest continuously in our people. We hire several hundred graduates every year, and we spend an awful lot of time, effort and energy converting those into experienced professionals. And we also invest in the tools we use to do our job, be that digital design tools or the wider business tools and systems that we use. I'll give you an example, actually. We recently saw the opening of the Herring Bridge in Great Yarmouth, which is a £120 million scheme. I don't know if you saw a press release about it.
I saw a press release. I saw a picture on LinkedIn, yes.
Yeah, indeed. Look, and it's a great scheme, but WSP's been there from the inception, working with our client, Norfolk County Council, from selecting the scheme, design, doing the business case, getting the capital funding secured from central government, and then working with the client to secure a contractor, and then helping them oversee that contractor and get it into commissioning. Now, the bridge isn't just important because it's a bridge and it's going to relieve a bit of traffic in Lowestoft, in Great Yarmouth. It also links to Lowestoft, which is going to enable some further investments to service the offshore wind industry that's really developing and growing off the coast of Norfolk. So, a great example of us coming in, helping a client design a project, secure the funding, put it into operation, but also then realise some of the additional benefits that will help the long-term sustainability of their economy. I
mean, and what you're effectively talking about there is helping those the government departments to think in a system with a systems approach, actually to link all these investments up.
Absolutely.
And I suppose that is a vital bit, because if you look at the £800 billion plus infrastructure pipeline, a large proportion, of course, a lot of it is privately funded, but an awful lot of it comes from the public sector. I mean, how do you think that central and local government, can be helped to smooth the flow of that? And I suppose to think of it in terms of that systems thinking approach that you talked about there.
Yeah, no, it's a good challenge, and I could talk more on for ages about the public and the private sector mix, but I think in terms of, if I was going to focus on the public sector, it would be helpful if they could make better and more consistent decisions, if they could take a longer term view. Government's in a kind of almost a unique position in that it's always going to be there, but strangely, that doesn't always drive long term thinking. The political time horizons, but also some of the sort of the civil service and council officer time horizons tend to be fairly short and driven by media sentiment and election cycles as much as they are about long-term investment. The second point I would make is around those organisations, particularly the governmental organisations, investing in their people's skills and capabilities, and then going on and rewarding them for specialising. If you talk central government or councils, there's a real feeling of the generalist being king. It's not necessarily true at some of the specialist agencies, more your National Highways or Network Rail, where they do have more specialisms. But those core government parts of the mix do tend to have more specialists. And then the other thing I would talk to is around planning and consenting, which is a real bottleneck for many of the sectors we feed into, whether that's new power stations, road investments, or any major scheme, even housing. And some of it's down to the process that's been invented and the capacity of the players within that process to get things through the pipeline. But more often than not, it's actually down to local politics and decision making. And unfortunately, I see many politicians who would seek to delay or defer what is a contentious, they're nearly always going to be contentious decisions because there's winners and losers. And we need to get a political mindset that says, I stand for something bigger, and I'm willing to accept that there will sometimes be contentious decisions, but they're in the best interest of the place as a whole, or the economy as a whole. And I should be standing up and championing those decisions as well.
The consulting sector, of course, has actually changed a huge amount in the last decade. The creation of a number of large global mega consultancies. For a business like WSP, you've got, I think it's 66,500 staff globally. That's huge. What are the challenges that you face, and how does that compare with the challenges faced by perhaps smaller consultants?
Well, ultimately, all consultancy, we're people businesses, and we deliver projects. And the global consultancies probably have the capacity to deliver the mega projects, but actually, in reality, for every client, that project they're buying from us, that's their priority at that point in time. And we need to make sure whether they're buying a 20 grand bridge refurbishment design, or it's a mega station for HS2, that client needs to feel that we value their work, and we're desperately keen to deliver it, and we're going to give them our best people and deliver on time and with high quality.
Well, yeah, when I spoke to Richard Robinson, boss of Atkins Realis, last year on the podcast, it was something that I asked him, how do you retain the focus on the client need? And innovation, and avoid returning to the so-called sausage machine solutions, because you need to keep the business of that scale going. How do you do that? How do you make sure you are innovative all the time?
Yeah, but we the key for us is our client culture, the way we instill an entrepreneurial spirit, founder's mentality, whatever phrase you want to use, into all of our sort of frontline managers to make sure they see they take personal ownership of that client experience.
Right.
Where that comes up against the challenge is where we're in markets that are largely commoditized and clients that buy purely on price, and that will drive us to create more automated solutions, more commoditized solutions, and to try and use, a sausage machine is the wrong term, but to try and use a more process-orientated design approach that will meet the client's objective if their pure objective is price.
Yeah.
And, we need to get that balance right by understanding what it is that particular client on that particular project wants, and making sure our solution meets their objective.
So it's trying to make sure that everybody, wherever they are in a large organisation, feels like they are working for a small business, feels like they're empowered. Yeah.
And we drive engagement, empowerment, and kind of client experience are the key things we talk about in all our leadership meetings. So it shouldn't surprise you. And in some ways, if you asked a member of our team who their loyalty is to, they will generally say the project team they work with regularly, and then they might say the office location in which they're based, and then they might say the discipline. I'm a building services engineer, or I'm a civil engineer, and then they might say WSP. And we need to be honest about that and mindful that that's the reality of the experience of our colleagues. But I want their first loyalty should be to their clients and their projects. And then we don't really have to worry about too much else.
But as Managing Director of WSP's UK Transport and Infrastructure team, you look after a £260 million slice of the business. You've got 2,700 staff focused on highways, rail, bridges, ITS, civil infrastructure, tunnelling, not all of which you're an expert in, I imagine. But, what are the main challenges when it comes to keeping this kind of business going? And everybody, as you say, focused on their clients' needs and focused on delivering innovative solutions.
Sure. So look, we, in terms of my big challenges, I tend to look at my business through four lenses. Firstly, are we winning enough work? Yeah. And the best way to win work is to keep your current clients happy, deliver great work for them, and they will just keep coming to you and ask for more. Secondly,
So when you say enough, you mean also the right kind of work?
Yeah. I mean, well, we think long and hard about. We do occasionally turn down work, but if we have a strategic client come and ask us to help solve a problem, we will put our best brains to how we can solve it for them. And if you price work correctly and sign the right types of contracts, all work's the right work. And you can make mistakes doing the right work and regret it later as well. So it is really important that quality of delivery to your existing clients is the best source of future work. Secondly, I worry about our people. Are we attracting and retaining the right talent? Are we motivating them, engaging them, and making them believe that this is the place they want to stay to further their careers? Mm-hmm. And that is, easily said, very difficult to do. And then thirdly, I worry about technical innovation. Are we driving and striving to be the leader, to be at the forefront of each and every discipline? And it doesn't matter, you've listed some there, but for each of those disciplines you listed, there's probably 5 or 10 sub-disciplines within each of them where there are specific technical innovations happening. And we want to make sure that our clients perceive our work to be at the forefront of what is technically possible, and gets that balance between technical innovation, risk, efficiency right. And then the fourth kind of pillar to our business is the efficiency of the operation. And if I get all those 4 things in balance, clients and work winning, happy people, technical innovation, efficient operation, I'll have a hugely successful business.
It's a huge range of things that WSP gets involved with, which is interesting when you look at your own career, because of course before joining WSP 3.5 years ago, you were at transport operator, the Go Ahead Group, and you're rail development director, thoroughly enmeshed in the rail sector. What drew you towards this more general engineering consultancy business?
That's a good question. I'd been at Go Ahead, great company, really enjoyed my time there, but I'd been there 9 years, and it was when I joined, it was a very successful business operating in one country, and I'd been challenged by the board, the chief exec, to make it an international business, and we were by that point running in 5 different countries. But I'd sort of done my time, and I was in the market looking for what might come next. And WSP were one of the people who I was kind of lucky enough to interview with, and Mark Naismith, regional CEO, interviewed me, had a really good rapport with him. And it's a bit of a cliche, but you follow good leaders, right? Mark was
right.
I met him several times over the process. I did my due diligence on WSP as a company, pulled the accounts, looked at the website, saw all the, tried to understand how it was culturally to work here. Mm-hmm. And I'm really pleased to say, actually it's turned out as I expected. It's been a great experience for me, and I'm really really happy. So,
but you've been in consulting before. You spent 4.5 years at KPMG. I mean, how is the world of KPMG different from the world of WSP? I mean, is it just a higher daily fee?
No, they're quite different businesses. And there are times when our sort of the engineering technical consulting sector and the big 4 and strategy houses do cross over, but we're more complementary really. And the higher fees are often driven by value, and you have to remember those big 4 consultants, a third of their business is audit, which is a statutory requirement for any large organisation to have an audit. A third of their business is tax. And quite often they get paid on a contingent fee basis. So if a corporate comes to them and says, we pay 100 million in corporation tax, save me some money, they'll say, okay, I'll do a load of work if I can save you 10 million. I want 10% of it. And that's how they earn a big fee doing that. And then they have their consulting arms, of which a significant part is around transaction services, M&A, and helping companies raise debt or buy other companies, which I don't think anyone like us is ever going to directly compete with. Then they have their kind of public sector strategy arms, who we do sometimes partner with, and we sometimes compete with, doing things like National Highways Net Zero strategy or other projects we've done through the SPATS framework, where we have KPMG as part of our partnership. So it's not a huge overlap, and where we do overlap, I think we often tend to be more complementary than competitive.
You wouldn't get them to design a tall tower anyway, would you, or anything like that? So
no. Well, just as you wouldn't ask me to go and do an audit. So we know what we're good at, and we're often best sticking at those things where we've got our deep technical channels, right?
You've also had a bit of your career in the public sector. You worked at the DfT as a franchise sponsor. I mean, that sounds like a tough gig. Any advice for those planning and driving rail reform right now?
Yeah, so it's an interesting link. A guy I know well, Alex Hines, has just been appointed as the Director General of DfT to oversee all the rail reforms. Alex is a friend. He was the guy who hired me to go and work at Go Ahead Group. He's previously been running Scotland's railways, so I'll be slightly careful what I say in terms of advice for Alex. But the UK rail industry is in a very difficult place. It's recovering from an existential shock with the COVID crisis. And I remember, being on the board of some of the largest train operators in the UK when COVID hit, and seeing the government tell your customers to stay at home and give this perception that public transport is dirty or dangerous that is embedded in quite a lot of people's minds. And we are seeing demand come back. London Underground and some of the commute routes into London are busy Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, but society's also changed, right? We've got used to working at home, and that has benefits for people. And that has led to a substantial and sustained reduction in business travel. And they're going to have to do something different to redress the imbalance in the finances, the hole that's left. They either need government to accept they're going to need hundreds of millions, if not billions of pounds more of operational subsidy every year for the railway, or they're going to have to do something different, which might involve fares and marketing. It might involve changing the service level. It might involve reducing some of the levels of capex that they spend. And it's not easy. There's no simple answers. Then you layer on top of that the current union challenges they're having, and the very intractable trade dispute, which is essentially between the government and the unions. And it's a tough job Alex has got. So I wish him every success.
Yeah, I know. It sounds like you're very passionate about rail, but you're very pleased no longer to be actually in it. So, I want to mention that you started life as an economist, and it's fair to say that perhaps engineers tend to spend perhaps too much time designing and not enough time considering these wider issues, such as you talk about around the rail sector. What actually drives that infrastructure and what drives the revenues that back it? The economic consequences, I suppose, of their efforts. Would you say that's fair? What advice would you give engineers on that?
I think it is fair to a degree. I would say not necessarily you have to look at always at that huge big picture stuff, but what you really need to make sure you understand is the asset you're designing or writing a remediation plan for, or whatever else it might be. Really stop and think about how it's used, who's going to use it, who's going to operate it, who's going to maintain it, and we're trying to solve their problems, right?
Yeah.
Far too often we approach everything from a purely technical engineering perspective and say, what does the code say? How should I build this? What did we do last time? Let's just do that again. And I think we would be better served by starting with the user, whether that's a driver on national highways, a rail passenger, or the customer to a water company. All of those people are why those assets exist,
okay.
Right?
Well, just before we move on to talk about a bit more about the politics of infrastructure. Infrastructure, it's a serious business, but I saw some pictures the other day of your WSP conference, I think you had in Spain, where people seem to be having quite a bit of fun there. How should infrastructure professionals have more fun when they're actually at work? And I suppose, what do you do to have more fun?
So I'm glad you picked up on the conference in Spain. It's hugely important that we do all get together, as we're all human beings, and those human interactions and contacts are what drive innovation and give people a sense of place and purpose to want to come to work. When I talked about those kind of 4 pillars we use to drive the business, the engagement in the people, making sure they feel that they are where they want to be at work when they come to work with us, and that they are enjoying it. They feel safe. They feel positive. They feel they're working to a purpose. All of those things are, they're hugely important. And we write lots of strategies saying we're going to, but the reality is you have to make it happen on the ground day in, day out. We've just opened a new office here in London in Canary Wharf. I'm going to be taking a couple of hundred people out for some pizzas and a few beers this evening, just to kind of say thank you for putting up with us whilst we were moving house. But it's those the accidental conversations that happen this evening, which will stem to work on projects in future for clients and create networks that are to the benefit of the business, but also everybody else around us. So.
Because lack of diversity does remain a huge problem across the sector. I mean, how are you making sure that you are, apart from buying people pizzas and a few beers every now and again, how do you make sure you attract the brightest, the smartest young professionals to WSP?
No, it's good. We have, I don't know if you'd have picked up on this, but we have just launched our global employee value proposition, which is essentially, it's the promise the business makes to the colleagues who work here. And there are 2 audiences for that. There are, our internal people who are already here and making sure we retain them. And there is a recruitment mindset to it as well. Now, the sort of catchphrase is "with us you can," but it's about telling the stories about the great and diverse careers that people can have, the amazing things that they can get involved with, whether that be on the environmental consulting and ecology, right the way through to geotechnical design and everything else we do, and making it really clear that their career journey is our commitment to them, and that they might not know when they sign up as a graduate what they want to be doing for the next 25, 30 years, but that they will be able to face choices through that pathway that the business will enable them to have those broad experiences doing different things, possibly also traveling globally and working with different clients in different sectors in different countries. So we're striving really hard to do that, because if we don't, other people will, and they'll attract our talent away. So and there's a lot of research at the moment that says if you went back 25 years, people made very sort of clear decisions purely based on reward, and they would join the company they thought that was going to pay them the most over their career, and they'd often stay there a long time. Generation Z, as the Americans would say, or Gen Z, don't necessarily think like that. They want a business that's got a purpose, that's going to be fun to work in, that offers them a variety and a future. I mean, those are the people we're now needing to talk to and change our kind of mindset as to how we approach it. So I
get the impression that you're very passionate about what you do, Charlie. But what do you do when you're not at work? What floats your boat outside of work?
I've got 2 young kids, so they take up an inordinate amount of my time. But when I do get free time, I love to be outside, whether that's walking the dog through the woods, skiing, climbing a mountain, whatever it might be. Okay. So something physical that takes all of my attention and gives me a sense of achievement at the end of it.
What sort of dog have you got?
I have. She's still a puppy. She's a 6-month-old golden doodle. And she's growing unbelievably fast. She's turning into a horse. Every morning I come down and see her, oh God, she's grown again.
And you good at recall?
Yeah, she's actually pretty well behaved, which is good. I don't think that's a reflection of the 2 children who are trying to train her, but it's
good stuff. Well, I look forward to meeting this doodle. Let's talk about the politics of infrastructure for a moment. There's a general election in 2024. All parties are talking about energy transition, transport regulation of public services, housing planning. Are there any particular infrastructure policy issues that you see as likely to create a divide between the parties?
At the moment, if I'm honest, the depth and clarity with which any of the parties have published their plans they're all at that kind of high level strategic values kind of context. And they're all saying similar things, that they want to invest in the infrastructure of the economy. They want to drive the green transition. So there's not enough detail for me to really give you an opinion on one party's kind of process is better than others. If I was going to meet with the people that were writing those manifestos, the things I would say are make sure you build the capability and capacity on the public side to achieve your ambitions, and don't underestimate the challenge of doing that. Make sure you keep the money flowing. It's a bit, brass tacks, but it's the reality. So don't turn it on and off all the time. And I would look to address the strategic planning context. Now that's not just planning and consenting. That's also, we have this national infrastructure statement that comes out now from time to time, but really actually it has no statutory underpinning or power, and government can choose to just ignore it when they want to. So finding a way that the National Infrastructure Commission becomes a more empowered body to, maybe it's never going to make the day-to-day decisions on the power grid or the railway or the water industry, but that its voice becomes a little bit more pointed and focused in a way that people respond to it, I think would be really important.
Well, one of the criticisms is always that infrastructure or transport or any of the engineering sectors, they don't really have the kind of clout or the interest, the political interest that really is needed to try and sway politicians towards particular decisions. I mean, how what could the infrastructure sector or businesses like WSP, what can you do to help to change that, to help?
The stark reality of it is the vast majority of infrastructure, most voters if it's working perfectly, they don't notice it. And that's how it should be. You turn the tap on and nice clean water comes out of it. You don't think about where it's come from or why or how or anything else. And similarly for transportation. So we need to kind of make sure that the technocrats, the officials and the politicians are willing and able to engage in something that is not, it's never going to be the number one electoral priority. People are going to worry about healthcare. They're going to worry about national security. They're going to worry about schools. And infrastructure will normally come, further down the political pecking order. For me, though, going back to those first statements we made, infrastructure completely underpins the sustainability of our society and our economy. So it's really, really important. But you can probably get away with not thinking about it for 2 or 3 years because it's just there and it kind of does what it needs to do.
Well, that said, of course, it's a global business and you are a global business. I mean, I suppose, your global footprint is a key part of what you do. I mean, to what extent, do you see WSP as being this kind of huge global family rather than a UK business, with a global parent?
So we are definitely a global business, but we strive that all our clients and projects are locally delivered, but with the benefit of having that umbrella of global expertise you can draw upon. And we are of the large competitors of comparable to us. We've grown incredibly rapidly. And one of our guiding principles is about that local empowerment, local decision making. And I think that actually is what drives the quality of the colleague and client experience. And I think we will hold on to that as we continue to strive to grow and be even bigger and everything else. So
brilliant. Well, sum it up for me then. I mean, let's go back to the opening premise. I mean, how do we navigate this constantly shifting national and local government policy? How do we overcome the hold-ups in planning, the delays in delivery, the cost overruns? How do we do all that to actually start delivering some fantastic outcomes for the people of the UK?
So first thing I would say is we have to accept the reality in front of us, and we're not going to change the political landscape, so we just have to accept it. Secondly, I do somewhat challenge the narrative that the UK is that much worse than anyone else at delivering some of these projects. If you look, part of the reason we're now based in Canary Wharf is because the wonderful Elizabeth line can now get us across London in no time at all. And it did face some delays at the back end, and WSP was involved in solving some of those problems, but it's going to be there for 150 years, and it's changed communities already, and it will continue to do so. So I think we need to retain that high degree of positivity about the purpose of all the things we're trying to achieve. And when those difficult things happen, or the stop-start nature of sometimes the funding, or some political stakeholder stands up and makes a speech that chooses to knock a certain scheme because it's in their political interest at that point in time, I think we just have to roll with the punches and keep going. So
right.
build some resilience.
Brilliant. Well, that's a great note to end on, Charlie. So thanks very much for sharing that with. It's a really interesting big challenge there, but as you say, huge amounts of opportunity in terms of what needs to be done. So thanks very much for sharing your thoughts today. Really interesting conversation for sure, and hopefully it gives people some food for thoughts, and maybe even puts WSP top of mind when they're thinking of where their next job is. So Charlie, thank you very much for joining me.
Take care, Anthony. Great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. That's all we've got time for today, but we've got more from the Infrastructure Podcast in the pipeline and more guests to talk to as we continue to probe the big issues faced across the sector. If you haven't done so already, do check out the Infrastructure Podcast website. That's www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you'll find background information and all the latest podcasts to listen to and to share. So thanks for joining us today. Thanks again to Charlie, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.